So this is the microphone that I'm using at the moment. Now, I'm hesitant to actually share my current setup with you because it's not a good setup to start off with. It's only a good setup once you really know what you're doing, because if you don't get the settings right, it can sound horrible, and it can sound a lot worse than a microphone like the Samsung QTU. But you see what I'm using, so I might as well share exactly what my current setup is. And that's using the OC18 microphone from Austrian Audio. Now, this goes against to what I was saying about dynamic and condenser microphones, in that this is a condenser microphone. And so you've got to be quite specific directionally about where it's pointing towards. Obviously, you can't talk directly into it at all, but you can't move too far away from it either. You've got to be a bit careful with this type of microphone to actually pick up background noise. But I've done some testing on it. I think directionally where I'm at, and without too much background noise in my environment, I think it's quite good. And this microphone is plugged into a piece of equipment called an Art Voice channel, and that is a hardware compressor, and offers me the opportunity to add different EQ to my voice channel. And I like fiddling about with my voice a little bit more, so I've added a touch more compression and other elements to it using my Rodecaster. And the good thing about Rodecaster is I can connect other devices to it, other microphones to it, but also other devices where I can add in different sound effects. I can click buttons on it and have a great deal of hilarity going on. So I can bring in different elements there as pressing different buttons on the Rodecaster. So that's a summary of my setup there. Duncan's saying, do you have any testing prep recommendations while figuring out to put the microphone and how it's working? Software can give you recommendations for you that don't have ears of a musician. What I would recommend, Duncan, is that you get a recording of a news channel or a radio presenter, hopefully without too much compression, but a recording of a presenter that you like the sound of, and that you don't necessarily want to speak like, but you like the audio quality of. And then you play that against your own voice, and you tweak your own voice against that. Now, it's a complicated game. There are so many things that you can tweak. I think the key thing is coming in at a decent level, speaking a decent distance away from the microphone, not speaking directly into it, and getting comfortable with moving around the microphone without moving too far away from the microphone. So in general, that Samsung QTU is fine out of the box, 45 degrees away from your face, pointing towards your mouth, 3 inches away from your mouth. That will do the job. That will get your sound quality to way better than average. Jenny saying, so helpful seeing those love podcasting equipment examples. Thank you, Jenny. Hopefully it was helpful. So there we go. That's comparing the audio quality of different devices there as well. Software briefly. There's different types of software out there. I use Riverside a bit. I also really like Remotely. That's Remotely there as well. These are two services that you can use to record yourself and your guest locally on your own devices, and then have those tracks, individual tracks, sent to you afterwards without relying on the internet to get the recording to you. Now, recording everyone on the same track over the internet is horrible. I'm not sure if it's changed much, but Zoom used to be notoriously poor when it came to audio quality, as far as I'm concerned. And if you can record everyone on separate tracks, then at least you're giving yourself the opportunity to do things like isolate background noise when someone's not talking. So separate tracks is important, but the quality of the track is important. So the quality of the track can be significantly enhanced if you record directly on their device and then get those tracks sent to you afterwards. And then it's so much easier for editing. It's to a certain degree, it requires a professional editing job as well. And it's not something that I would encourage the average marketing person to do within an organization because you've got so much going on. Um, Outsource to a professional editor, outsource to someone like ourselves, Casting Cred. We obviously specialize in production as well as editing and publishing. So it depends what you're looking for as well. But there's so much competition. As I mentioned, there's over 2.5 million podcasts out there. People are listening to high quality media, and then they're listening to your podcast. So how favorably do you compare with them? Other software, so I mentioned Captivate. So that's what I use to upload episodes to, and then that gets distributed to the various podcast platforms. Planning your show. It's really important to, as I said, plan the first 12 episodes. Branding, snappy descriptive works as far as I'm concerned. I used to have a really successful podcast called Digital Marketing Radio, and that got to the top 10 of Apple Podcasts for the phrase digital marketing in terms of organic reach, and got to about 20,000 downloads a month. So that was a fairly successful show. I've ended up having quite a bit of client work, so I put that on pause, indefinite pause for a while, but we'll see if I get back to it or not. But it's not on my list of priorities to get done anytime soon. Script intros and outros and bullet in between. So what I mean by that, write down precisely what you're going to do, what you're going to say to start the show, what you're going to say to close the show, and then bullet in between, because you don't want to script everything. You want to be a little bit natural in terms of what you're saying during the show. Make the intro snappy. That means quick. That means concise, but it also means incorporate exactly what you want to say, but not a word more. Because every single word that the intro goes on, the person, the consumer, the listener is less likely to keep on listening throughout the whole podcast. Call to action. I'm a fan of driving people towards your website. I'm not a fan of trying to sell things directly from a podcast. So if you can drive people towards a podcast, if you can say that there's a resource from this individual episode that you can get on the accompanying blog post, for example, you can mention a few different websites, and if you just go into your blog, so instead of mentioning the websites directly, say we'll make a list of all these resources on the blog post, so get people to your site. Then they have an opportunity to experience your other content and perhaps opt into your email list from there as well. How long should an episode be? As long as is required. Successful podcasts can be over 2 hours long per episode, but they can also be less than 10 minutes per episode. So as long as is required for your own individual podcast. And how often should you publish? As often as possible. If you can only do once every 2 weeks, that's fine. Be consistent.